This week on Hacking TV, YouTube digs deep to cover fair use defense for some of its creators.
Vice continues its promiscuous flirtation with all the platforms and networks it can.
MSNBC explores a rare sharing relationship with, of all places, Bloomberg.
And Yahoo's negative press barrage continues.
All that, plus the FCC adds its voice to the BingeTV question. I'm Steve Rosenbaum.
And I'm Saul Hansell, and I'm thankful that this is Hacking TV.
And I am thankful as well. Welcome, Saul, and glad to be here on this wonderful Thanksgiving parade week. By the way, before we even get into the show, what are the odds you're going to be able to watch the Thanksgiving Day parade online somewhere this year? How many Periscope feeds will there be?
Do you think that the Periscope user wants to pirate the Thanksgiving Day parade?
I do. And in fact, I'm saying it now. I'm going to go to the parade and put it on Meerkat or Periscope.
You going to the parade for you is walking out your front door, right? Or
pretty much, yeah, pretty much, just okay. Around the block. Anyway, but back to the matter at hand. It is, as we come up to the run up of the holiday. This is a week full of news. There's a lot to talk about.
We're starting with a topic that we haven't talked a lot about. It's been on the edges, which is Hollywood versus fair use and copyright. YouTube has spent its entire 10-year existence caught in between its users and the lawsuits, and then later Google's desire to make friends with Hollywood. Now Google, which may not be friends with Hollywood, is taking a step again towards the creators.
I had a story that you may remember. A couple of years ago, I put up a clip from a film that I made and got a takedown notice and had it actually removed because an old distributor that no longer had rights to the film had left my name on their list of things they owned. And it took a real bit of effort for me to get my own film back on YouTube, even though I clearly had the rights to it. This is a sticky wicket of an issue. And the fact that YouTube is now ending up on the maker side of the argument, I think is a good thing. I think it's an excellent thing.
Well, they've got there for the last several years. I've noticed, that Fred Van Loman, who had been an advocate lawyer for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, is now YouTube's head copyright lawyer. So the news of the week is that in certain cases, they are now going to pay for lawyers to defend creators who have, in Google's estimation, good fair use cases. And
well, and the thing about fair use, is, it is really not a black and white legal issue.
No, it is not. I mean, the law is, I think, artfully written. It tells a judge to look at 4 factors in deciding whether a copyright claim is valid and or exempt under fair use. And it is are they making something new and different out of the copyrighted work, as in a literary criticism or satire? Are they hurting the economic value of whatever it is that's the underlying work by copying its essence, say, broadcasting the entire Thanksgiving Day parade on Periscope? That would be undercutting the premise of the network. And 2 other also pretty good ones. But it is given to any given judge to evaluate the trade-offs.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the clue is, I'd like to think that it's just Fred Van Loman being a good guy, but he's part of a larger ecosystem. And I think what you're feeling is collectively YouTube understanding that there are now, between Facebook and Amazon and Vessel and Vimeo and a variety of other, VHX, like there's starting to be this drumbeat of other choices for creators at YouTube. And so I think their decision to step up and become RAR pro creator is a sign that they're going to lean into their maker community, and that's a good thing.
I can see again that Apple is continuing to be very glad they don't have any user-generated content, because then they can be both very pro-privacy, which gives them cred in the sort of hacker liberal, techno-libertarian sector, and yet very pro-Hollywood. because they don't have to worry about, that pesky copyright question.
And I have, since we spent time last week, spent a little more time on my Apple TV, and I can report, as the apps are slow in coming, and it is, in fact, in some strange ways, even more of a closed system than the Apple TV 3.
Why?
So we used to really enjoy listening to internet radio on our Apple TV.
Uh-huh.
And while you still can sort of listen to internet radio on your Apple TV, it's harder. It's not through. If you go through their interface, it takes you to all iMusic stuff. And internet radio is definitely, it's an app you have to get, and it's just not. It's another little window they're trying to shut down a little bit, it feels to me. So
this is the problem, the thumb on the scale question in all of these things where Apple does this balance, sort of letting competitors on, but not completely, and, it's a pain in the ass.
And by the way, one more thing just to throw into the YouTube versus the world conversation. So on YouTube, we put up this show, and we get, a big number every week, sometimes 4 or 5 views. On Facebook, where we put up a file, we're now getting 90 or 100 views. Now, one can argue they're not really views. They don't give you visibility into how many seconds. They will if you pay for the ad. But if you just do it as a free upload, at this point, they're not releasing analytics, although presumably they will. But 90 as opposed to 5
is a big deal.
I like the number 90. It makes me happy.
Yes. So, next story, we have been tracking Shane Smith and Vice, trying to see if he can multiply his astronomical market capitalization by, add another zero to it by doing deals with everybody around. This week, I guess, they launched their 6-minute daily newscast on another topic we keep following, which is Verizon's Go TV. What do you make of that?
I'm a little puzzled because I thought they did a deal with HBO for essentially the same product.
Why not sell the same product over and over again to as many people as you can?
If I were, I guess it wasn't exclusive to HBO. I maybe misread the press release. I thought it was, hey, there's a daily Vice show, and it's going to be on the HBO app, and that's going to make the HBO app really appealing because it's there. And then somehow Go90 jumped ahead of HBO. The HBO, whatever the HBO deal is, hasn't launched yet, but they're already daily on Go90. It's promiscuous, I believe, is the word we used in the open, and I'm not sure you could call it anything other than that. It is, in fact,
it's one of two things. We will have to go compare. It's either two ever so slightly different versions, Vice News versus News from Vice on HBO, where they just re-edit everything with a different underpaid, chipper young host from Williamsburg, or it's multiple syndication, which is, well understood these days. You make it and you sell it to everybody who wants to pay you for it.
It's got to be a separate show. It's got to be a separate show. But by the way, here's the inside baseball story about Vice. So there was a very high profile luncheon that Shane Smith was honored at on Wednesday of last week. It was our friend Max Robbins' Center for Communication luncheon, and there was a lot of press on it was actually a roast. It was a Shane Smith roast, and I am told by my spies who were in the room that it was an extraordinarily high-profile room of executives. I mean, the senior of the most senior from all of the big media companies were there to pay homage to Mr. Smith, which I think is fascinating.
All bow down to market cap and marijuana. It's the.
I'm also told that the roast itself was quite bawdy and rather R-rated.
Well, you would expect at least as much, unless to really roast him, they went back and had, Dick Van Dyke and, Lucille Ball do a scrubby clean version just to confuse everybody. I don't know.
So wait, here, I gotta read. I'll read a couple of these. These are the best printable versions Variety reported. Tom Freston, in his roast said, quote, Vice today has a valuation as bloated as Shane is.
Shane, if you haven't seen him, is a big guy.
Yeah. Richard Plepler, referring to Vice's recent special on federal prisons that featured President Obama, said, quote, the president called Shane to thank him for the interview and the delightful contact high. This was the nature of this lunch. So perhaps a video will come out, and if so, we'll try and get it to you.
Sounds good. Not anywhere near held in esteem by the media community. MSNBC is trying to revive itself with, the return of Andy Lack, the former head of NBC News, who was again the head of NBC News, who did a little bit of time at Bloomberg, and he is now trying to bring, or so the rumor goes, a simulcast of Bloomberg's daily politics show onto MSNBC, which is a very curious blending, would be a curious blending of competitors.
So I have no inside information. You have no inside information. But one can only, I assume that if you go back and check the chronology, that the Judd Heilman, Mark Halperin show was an Andy Lack deal. And that, would he have started by saying, why don't we move the show? And then Bloomberg said, we're keeping it. And then he said, what about we rebroadcast it? How would that work?
Well, it's interesting because Bloomberg has had simulcasts in the other direction for its entire history. Bloomberg pays for the studio for Charlie Rose, and the Charlie Rose show is run on Bloomberg TV and radio as well as on PBS. And they're very, they've had a lot of deals, but this new show, with all the money they're spending on it, was meant to launch Bloomberg into a new orbit. But I think it also represents yet another sign of the wishy-washiness of Mike and company about what exactly is its media division. Nobody I know who works there, and I know a lot of people who work there, can actually answer the question, what is the purpose of Bloomberg Media? Everybody knows that the purpose of the Bloomberg company is to sell, $2,000 a month terminals. And so the premise is everything that they do in media is either A, to promote the terminals, B, to build a new business, but with the rule that they don't screw up the terminals, or C, never mind that, just get our name as big as possible because we want to do the world's biggest media IPO. And nobody knows which it is.
They hired some extraordinarily high-profile people in the last couple of years, and then they've all either been let go or quit, and that happened with some pretty high froth. I was surprised. It isn't. I guess I'm not inside, so I don't know whether the rumors that Bloomberg, if you bonked heads with him, you lost your job, was basically rewriting history, or whether or not I have trouble imagining he wants to run the media business.
Well, he came back and is now CEO of the company, and he has always cared about the media business because it affects his public image. I think, a decade or 15 years ago, he used the media business to help his mayoral ambitions. There was a moment, oddly, about a year before the mayor's race, they mailed a radio to 1 million people in New York City that could only tune in to Bloomberg Radio. Just a coincidence, perhaps. But what they still have to figure out what they really want to do. So, they've got very good people. Business Week has gotten to be a better magazine. It's one of the great news organizations of the world, but the company suffers, I think, even more than the New York Times does from the managerial problem of having too many smart people. Right? You really only want to have the right number of smart people on any given problem, and after you add too many cooks, the broth gets sour. And I think that Bloomberg, because they have all the money in the world, hires lots and lots of very good people, and they're running around crashing into each other.
All right, so betting man, what is the likelihood that the Halpern show will have a second broadcast on MSNBC? On a scale of 1 to 10.
I think that a deal can be done. I'd say 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think for Bloomberg to be on a broader distributed cable network and have their name out there is not a bad thing. And I think the show is appropriate for MS. And I think that, what Andy knows better than most people is that the really hard thing about making great television is talent. And I think that show, as a potential audience member, I'd like to watch that show. I think Halpern in particular, who I know better than Heilman, I think is a super smart guy. And you may remember him from ABC back in the day when he was political director at ABC. I mean, he's a very, very smart, well-sourced, capable guy. And, and the political season, which is now heating up, is going to be, the money shot for the next 12 months.
And, the question, what do we do to replace Al Sharpton? It gives you some opportunities. I think that they have an opportunity. I mean, clearly the idea is to lean into hard news. They've got Brian Williams now, so that's a plausible tact for them. But, ranting people on politics, reciting talking points has sort of worked itself through, to my mind.
Yeah, as we all know, Jon Stewart put a bullet in that format with the "You're Hurting America" famous death of what was it called? Crossfire.
Yes.
All right, so we think this one will happen, and good for Andy for pulling it off if he does. That would be a good thing. So let's dig into the soap opera that is Yahoo. But you wanted to start with the community story because you thought that was, important, and I agree.
So Yahoo picks up Community, a soap opera that I think was Fox canceled, and gets bamboozled by Sony Pictures. Instead of $1 million an episode, which is what Fox paid, paying $2.3 million an episode, presumably because Fox can get away with it and because the value for syndication on a show that is on a thing that nobody knows runs sitcoms is less. So guess what? They added up the numbers and they can't make money on this any which way. And I feel like this and the Katie Couric acquisition and so much else is just a sign that they don't know what the hell they are in a fundamental way, and they're just like grasping at straws, spending money without a scenario, right? I mean, have you ever talked to anybody who says, I like to watch TV shows on Yahoo the way they definitely do on Netflix and might well about Amazon or HBO Go?
So let's roll this back, though. Before we pick on Yahoo, who I think deserves a sharp pencil in a second, I will say this. Being at the upfronts, or the new fronts, the internet new fronts this spring, the number of people that were doing shows, half-hour long, weekly. AOL was doing a bunch, Crackle was doing a bunch, Yahoo was doing a bunch. There were all these announcements of shows, and they were pretty sexy, and some of them had real talent, and some of them, were, seemed like television. And I found myself both sucked into the energy of the thing, kind of excited by it, and then at the same time, I'm like I don't think I've ever watched a show on the internet, so like I'm not entirely sure how they're going to get my behavior.
Wait, you have not watched Game of a House of Cards,
Nope.
or Transparent, or none of.
Netflix, I consider, its own. Yes, absolutely. Watched plenty of Netflix and plenty of Amazon series, but
Why is that different than Yahoo or Crackle?
well, just to be entirely blunt, I don't think I know how to get a Yahoo show on my flat screen.
I think that, I mean, I have tried over and over to find what Katie Couric was doing, and it was almost impossible to actually find her stuff. I think that's a problem with Yahoo.
So I'm willing to watch short form on my phone or my iPad or my laptop or my desktop, but when it comes to I'm going to settle down and I want to watch a show and I'm winding down for the evening and it's my big 52-inch TV, like I don't think Yahoo's made its way to that device.
I think this is a challenge, right? I mean, we have house guests for my sister-in-law is in town. She wanted to watch TV on a TV that basically is only connected to an Apple TV. And so the scenario is, okay, let's go to Netflix and pick from that environment. So you log into an environment and then you have a set of choices within that. Now, it's not that hard to go up and over and get a different app, but that just requires just a little more brain space, and you got to go figure it out. And so there is, you got to make it easy, right? Easy counts for so much.
By the way, I'm not even sure whether it's easy or harder or impossible is what I'm saying. I mean, I know theoretically I can get AOL on my flat screen through Netflix, but I'm not sure I've ever actually tried that either. And then, back to Yahoo, I mean, you can feel the press gearing up to kind of have at, is it time? Has Marissa, outstayed her welcome? And there was some very pointed press in the last 2 weeks about the fact that she did a photo shoot that cost $70,000 with all of her executives as different characters of The Wizard of Oz. And the picture made its way onto the internet. And it was meant to be kind of a morale boosting thing. And, I felt badly when I read that article because, that wasn't her idea. I mean, I'm sorry. She is a serious chick, and she's just not somebody that's going to say, let's all put on funny costumes. So somebody internally, some HR person or some PR person or some outside advisor ginned up this idea that they would all be characters from The Wizard of Oz, and she went along gamely, trying to, get everybody fired up. And hanging that on her seems just entirely unfair.
I think that sort of thing, though, does draw in and reflect the CEO and the personality, because lots of CEOs would have just said no. I saw, and when I was at AOL, I saw there's these companies that are trying to.
Wait, hold on. No, you're burying the lead. Did you have to wear a costume at AOL? Did they make you wear the Tin Man suit?
One of the scenarios that Tim had decided at one moment was to think of our audience as towns and villages and cities, and to think of some of the infrastructure companies as highways. And he had the entire office building rearranged by town: tech town, woman town, car town, and everybody, you didn't have executives, you had mayors, and everybody had to move. And there were signs up. I mean, it wasn't just like a publicity photo. They spent lots of money on movers. And thankfully, before we settled into that and had to deal with, all the municipal unrest that was brewing, he went and bought Huffington Post, and Ariana would have none of that. And everything changed again, and it has doubtless changed 18 times since. But there's maybe, both Marissa and Tim Armstrong go back to Google. Google was wacky, but not in that way, I don't think. But there's a desperation of wanting to fire up the troops and get everybody marching this way. And the problem is, you have all these people, and by the time everyone sort of noticed supposed to march this way, somebody says, well, that's not working, and everyone wants to march the other way, and they can't get any momentum.
So before we run out of time, we had another shot in the ongoing Binge TV question, and the FCC chairman ostensibly signed off on T-Mobile's data cap exemption. I know this is a story near and dear to your heart.
I think that basically the world has looked at this, and just like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy evaluation of the Earth, and declared Binge On to be mostly harmless. And it's a fourth place player doing a deal that doesn't seem to unfairly make anybody any worse off, and so who the hell cares?
I have to tell you, I saw Wheeler speak at CES last year, and he was pretty damn impressive. He was glib and funny and knowledgeable and engaged, and I found him way more confidence instilling than I was expecting. Kind of a cardboard cutout FCC commissioner to kind of come in and read a press release, and he was actually he's well aware of the complicated knobs that he's fooling with.
Yes, and basically their job is to rein in Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T, and everything else doesn't really matter.
So you're saying T-Mobile wins by being of no consequence. Ouch.
And of no consequences, and presumably of no precedent, because one of the things that happens in this business is the small company of no consequence does something, and then the big company of great consequence does it with a little bit of an edge, but says, hey, if T-Mobile can do it, we can do it. But, which is perhaps what explained the very wishy-washy New York Times editorial that we talked about last week. But a more interesting question now is, does free low-res Netflix get anybody to sign up for T-Mobile who otherwise wasn't going to sign up for T-Mobile?
And I think we're going to say that I'm going down with a vote that it will.
Okay.
And people are so sensitive to bandwidth overages and how painful they are that the idea of an overage-free video experience, particularly for someone that doesn't have access to Wi-Fi on a regular basis, either in their home or at work or somewhere, I think it's appealing.
About a couple years ago, all of the cell phone companies played with the idea of, what if we made a Facebook phone, a phone that and we sold it as, the world's best experience for social stuff. And that didn't really go anywhere. All phones work just fine. But it may be that because of the data plan saying we're the very best Netflix experience, right? You can just watch TV at home without having to worry about things, may well resonate more because there's, more distinctive value in it.
Well, with that, we are out of time. So enjoy your over-the-top TV Thanksgiving and your OTT, which we will have to throw the word turkey into one of those T's. We didn't really prepare that, but let's over the turkey top week. And we will be back for another edition of Hacking TV next week.
Enjoy your holiday, your family, and watching the parade on Periscope. And see you next week. Keep on hacking.